Taking a look today at the high beam, low beam, I'll call it a toggle relay on the Volkswagen. This would normally be clipped up here, about like that, and my grasp of the situation is power comes in here and either goes out here for a low beam or here for a high beam, and it changes from one to the other when this terminal is grounded. So whenever you pull back on the turn signal stock, it grounds this, and this relay toggles to the other choice. So if you're in low beam and you ground this, it toggles to high beam. And it does not work at all when the headlights are off because it has no power supply. There's only 4 connections: the power, high beam, low beam, and the ground that switches it. Now, for about 10 years, I've been running 4 headlights, not just 2. And I believe that has taken a toll on this relay. It's becoming unreliable. And my plan is to route the current around this relay with another relay. Twice as many headlights means twice as much current. I'll add 1 or 2 relays, take the load off of this relay. So that's the plan for today. We'll see how far I get. So at this point I've disconnected what I believe is the high beam, the yellow wire, and then I tested to see that the relay would switch back and forth even with one of the headlight circuits disconnected, and it sounded like it was. So this will be important as to whether I install 1 additional relay or 2. Hopefully that'll be clear later. So next experiment, I disconnected both the high beam and the low beam, and the relay still clicks with just the power and ground hooked up. So that's a very good sign. I'm going to try to bypass the current around the relay using just a single extra relay. So our helpful friend is never far away from any project. So here are some parts I'm going to use. These square-shaped nesting relay holders with pigtails built in I found very difficult to find. I did finally find a supplier in Texas that provides these pretty economically, so that was a lucky find. And then from a different supplier I got these Tyco Electronics relays. I'll get the Bosch part numbers and include those later, but the main difference here is this one has a normally closed circuit. You can see there under my fingernail, looks like 87 and 87A. It toggles back and forth between when power is applied to the closing coil. This one, tough to see the diagram here, but 87 and 87 are actually tied together inside the relay. I think this is a pretty worthless feature. If they were like separated in the relay and then both powered when the relay closed, that would be helpful. But I mean, why tie those 2 terminals together in the relay? I don't understand why they do that. So we're going to try and use the purple one. 87A will be the low beam, and then when power is applied to this relay, it'll switch to 87, which I'll connect to the high beam. So here's the wiring diagram for this relay or circuit schematic. I think the toughest thing, or a tough thing, is going to be to figure out which terminal connects to which colored wire. I mean, it won't be that tough, but it's going to require some thought. But here you can see again, 87A is normally closed, and then it switches to 87. So 87A is going to be the low beam, 87 is going to be the high beam. I'm going to use the existing toggle relay to throw the switch, and notice also these have a preferred polarity. They want the plus to be connected to 86, not 85. And this diagram here on the iPad is courtesy of Texas Industrial Electric. That's where I got these from, so a free plug for them. So here's what I think I figured out. 30 is the red wire. That's going to be the feed from the headlight switch, and then this jumper will provide power to the existing toggle relay. The toggle relay will provide switched power, which I'll connect to 86, the yellow wire. The positive side of the closing coil. 85, the black wire, will go to ground. I'll hook that to underneath a screw somewhere. And then the blue and white, that's our power going to the low beam and the high beam through the new relay. Let's see if it works. So it seems to be working as I intended. I'll try to explain it again. The power from the headlight switch on this red wire powers the relay, and it powers the original toggle relay. So when the turn signal stalk is pulled back, the original toggle relay is grounded here, and it sends this power, which is just jumpered off of here, either to this terminal or this terminal. When it sends the power to this terminal, that throws the relay, which grounds here. The closing coil grounds here. When the relay is tripped, it sends power on the blue wire, which now is connected to the fuse box, and that powers the high beams. If I pull back on the stalk again, the toggle relay will switch to this terminal. The relay shuts off. The normally closed circuit is the white wire. It powers the low beams by this white wire going to the fuse box. I chose to connect this directly to the fuse box to eliminate one connection, but with the amazing wiring congestion here, most of which is VW, some of which I've added, it was pretty tough to make those connections, and I kind of regretted taking these wires out. I mean, they would have been up here and I could have just connected to them with male terminals. But it's hooked up and working now. I'm unlikely to change it. So at this point I've reinstalled the factory toggle relay. I haven't really found a place for this. It's probably just going to dangle indefinitely. And the headlights are on now. My assistant will pull back the stock. Maybe you can hear the sound of the relays, both the stock one and the one I just added. So every time the stock is pulled back, this one is switching back and forth, so it clicks every time. But only when it energizes this terminal, this guy is thrown, and that switches from low beam to high beam. I guess stage 2 of this project will be to run a wire from the battery to all the way from the battery and power this straight from the battery instead of from the headlight switch. So at this point, none of the headlight current is going through the toggle relay. If I power this from the battery, then none of the current will go through the headlight switch. I guess I've got to think about that a little bit. That idea probably will require 2 relays, since obviously if this was powered at all times, the headlight would be on at all times. And that was the big fork in this road. Do I put a separate high beam and a separate low beam relay? When I run the big wire from the battery, maybe I'll have to change that. Maybe I didn't think this through. But for now, I'm looking forward to much more reliable headlight operation. So at this point, I think I'm finished for today. I've got the factory toggle relay, reinstalled where it goes. I've got my additional relay just dangling from the wires, and that's probably how that's going to stay. The thoughts crossed my mind, this area is so congested here, and most of that is VW, but some of it is wires that I've added. Maybe some of this stuff I should elongate the wires and maybe, I don't know, move to the space between the front of the car and the gas tank. Put a bunch of relays or other electrical up here, because again, this is really congested, and to try to fix this, broken down on the freeway or the trail or somewhere would be really difficult. Anyway, I've got 4 headlights going now, and that amount of current over several years proved to be too much for the factory toggle relay, as we've previously discussed. This relay switches back and forth between the high beam and the low beam. An idea I had was to run a separate wire all the way from the battery up to here, and it dawns on me only now, to do that I would need a separate relay for high beam and a separate relay for low beam. And maybe if I change to 6 headlights, I think I need more alternator power to do that. But if I ever change to 6 headlights, maybe that's when I change to a separate relay for high beam and a separate relay for low beam. I think I'll see how this works for the next likely couple of years, and I'm looking forward to more reliable and brighter headlight operation in the days to come. So thanks, and be sure to watch my other videos.